So grew up in Portland?
Grew up in Portland, the Raleigh Hills area, and our first house, we lived until about 6th grade, and then we moved to another house maybe 2 miles away. So we stayed kind of in that same neighborhood our whole childhood.
What kind of neighborhood was it?
Typical suburban. I mean, it was the West Hills, Raleigh Hills, kind of near the West Slope area. So kind of walking distance, to 7-Eleven and Fred Meyer's and Farrell's, and but lots of families.
Now, and your parents, kind of what did they do at that time as you were growing up?
My dad was a pediatrician, so he was the third partner in his pediatric office, and was there for 30 some odd years. He had an office both in Northwest Portland and then in Lake Oswego. Mom was a housewife. So Mom stayed home, played a lot of golf, played a lot of bridge.
And you're a golfer now, so
yeah.
Did you learn to golf
I
early
did.
in those?
I did. She grew up, her great-grandfathers were both the founders of Portland Golf Club. And so she grew up at that golf club, and then we kind of grew up at that golf club. And by age 7 of getting dumped at the pool every day, a couple friends and I decided to take up the sport. So I played when I was really young. And played competitively for a number of years.
Oh, wow. Did you play in high school and college?
I stopped in high school. I decided that dance team was more important than competitive golfing. So, through middle school.
So, now, and you and Jimmy were, what, a year and a half apart?
Yeah, 18 months.
So, did you have some of the same friends growing up? Did you have sort of a moving community of
Yeah, because we were only 1 grade apart. So we had a lot of similar friends and overlapped over the years, both in his grade and my grade. And by high school, I would date his friends and he would date mine, and that always added a lot of extra interesting controversy to the family.
Lee, I think, said that the way he described Jimmy was really nice, but he said he wasn't he wasn't a player type person, but he was this romantic character. So he said he was in love with the idea of love.
Yeah.
Of being in love or something like that. It was just neat how he said it. Was that something that you saw exhibited early on with some of these cross?
I'll never forget talking to him in the back of the bus in like 7th grade. He had just broken up with another girl, and it was because she was missing some attribute, and I don't remember which one. Either she wasn't funny or she wasn't smart enough or whatever it was. And our lifelong debate was always about, is there a perfect person? And if there is, how long do you spend looking for him? And so he definitely kept going through that motion of looking for most of his life. Whereas I was much more of I got most of the components I want. I might not have everything, but I'm good to go. And to settle in and to enjoy, and not to spend time searching forever.
So he was kind of obsessive about finding
Yeah.
that perfect combination.
Yeah.
So I guess, and looking for other things too, he spent a lot of time kind of looking for a career, and you decided early on, or kind of knew early on, what you would be doing.
Yeah, same kind of philosophy. Like, I'm gonna go get this degree so that I can get this job, so that I can start earning this amount of money when I get out of school, and provide myself with other very structured opportunities. And he was completely the opposite.
So were you always a planner, even when you were younger? Let's think back to that neighborhood where you kind of organized thinker and...
Yeah, always the planner, always the babysitter, always the organizer, and still am. I get teased quite a bit. Actually, my nickname with a couple is the planner.
Okay. So, and then by contrast, what sort of, how structured was kind of just Jimmy in around that age? I mean, were there any sort of traits that, as he was growing up, that he exhibited? Artistic things, or...
He wrote a lot. He wrote an awful lot. Poetry, really into music, definitely into spending time with people. Not really in love with school, ever. Didn't see that as a vehicle that it was ever going to get him anywhere. even, I mean, all the way through college. You know, he got a liberal arts degree in communication at Linfield and didn't know what he wanted to do with it. So there was no purpose for him to pick a degree to go get a job. And he moved around job-wise quite a bit, did different things for different people.
What are some of the examples, or is there anything that stands out?
You know, his work at McMenamins was something he did for quite a while, that kind of bounced around from different restaurants, and he did work in the restaurant industry quite a bit. The Fat City Cafe for some friends. And
what kind of jobs did you have? Did you work as you were in high school? Or?
I started working in junior high so that I could earn money and shop, basically. Started working at Nordstrom's in 7th grade, and then I waited tables through the end of high school.
Were you somebody who always had a job all throughout
Yeah.
kind of college
Yeah.
and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Took internships during the summer in accounting because I thought that's what I wanted to do for a living, and always networking and trying to find the right experience and people.
Now, as far as your parents, do you see any, as far as your approach to things, is it similar to your parents' approach or your dad's approach to the business, or sort of being organized and that sort of thing? Or did they notice a contrast in the two of you? And
Oh, for
comment on
sure,
that?
for sure. I mean, and I don't know if I even said this before, but I always felt like I was the one that my mom wanted to talk about at the country club, and it was harder for her to talk about Jimmy because she didn't understand a lot of times what he was doing or why he was traveling. I got told after my parents passed away and Jimmy passed away, and I was seeing a counselor just to make sure I was staying on track, and I was told that I grieve like a man. That I just get busy and get back to work, and that a lot is my dad. He was, you know, working all the time and very organized and as structured as I was in terms of, you know, career and the other things he participated in.
So, and as you went into college, I don't know, did you ever waver kind of from your plan going into it? You kind of wanted to go into accounting, and
I knew I wanted to go into accounting, and so I went to school that offered a good accounting program, and I never even thought about changing my mind.
And were there any kind of experiences you had, or internships or activities that made you think, oh, maybe I want to try something else, or reinforced what you were planning on doing?
Much more reinforced. As I got into it and knew I wanted to pursue public accounting, I liked the opportunity of learning about a whole bunch of different industries from one firm, and thought that that might be a kind of launch pad for me to fall into another industry as a CFO or something in the financial world.
And then while Jimmy was in college, kind of, did you have discussions about like what's the point of college or things like that? Did you see him kind of struggling with that?
Yeah, it's more about what he wanted to do with it, and I really wanted to go to USC, and I got into USC, but I didn't want my parents to spend that kind of money, so I chose to go to ASU, which was a lot less expensive, basically not difficult at all to get into. You know, it definitely didn't make me feel good for how hard I worked in high school by getting into school there, because anybody could have gotten in for the most part. And Jimmy went to Southern Oregon to play football, and then after 2 years there, he decided to go to Linfield and finish, and it took him 3 years. And I was always like, I couldn't believe that he would have my parents pay for him to go to school there for 3 years and then not know what he wanted to do for a living.
So you would have liked to see a little bit of focus or return on investment planning going on.
Yeah, and he went there and created some things and joined a fraternity and did some stuff that I'm glad he got the experience doing. But, you know, when he finished and just hadn't even thought about a career and what he wanted to do, and then packed up and moved to Europe.
Now, did you do any traveling after college or anything? He went to Europe and traveled around. Did you kind of have a period of time before you jumped into the working world, or?
Nope. I had my job secured the October before I graduated. So I had a couple months off, but I started that following August.
Did you do anything in that couple months of time? And
Came home, but that was it.
did where do you think that Jimmy kind of got his impulse to then travel and wander around? Or
I think some of that was just related to his constant desire to explore and learn, and he would get tired of things here, and I don't know really where that came from, because I always thought things here were just fine. But he definitely wanted to get out of the U.S. For a number of years, and really found a lot of different opportunities over there that he didn't think he could find over here, in terms of people and places and history.
Yeah, and some of the other folks, I heard, I think several people, 2 or 3 times they said Jimmy thought he was an Eastern European Jew.
Yeah.
Sort of because of his interest in reading and writing and that sort of thing. Where did he kind of develop his political and philosophical outlook on things?
You know what? I really don't know. I mean, I would have to say just through his reading. I mean, he always was, especially in college, he really started to kind of branch away from the norm. I mean, in high school, he was playing football and hung out with the same people all through high school, so it was really more college. And then when he got over there, I think he just got more and more excited and just accelerated his learning process to try to figure out what his relationship was kind of in the world, and that's when he ended up in Poland.
So, and you still have the bottle with Trotsky on it. I mean, sort of his political interests, and I think last time you mentioned he was tired of the U.S. Is it kind of foreign policy that he was thinking of, or is it just philosophy?
I think it was philosophy. I think it was commercialism. I think it was capitalism in general. Because even when he was in Europe, as he started in France and Amsterdam, he just kept moving east and ended up in a place that at that point hadn't, communism was just ending. So there was a lot less capitalism over there and just a different way of life.
So that's very different, because you are somebody who marketing savvy, and you know how the system works and kind of use it to your advantage, and the advantage of Brooks wine. So is that something that you talked about, or did you think, what's the big deal? So there are commercials on TV or something. Did you ever have that conversation with him, or?
About selling the wine?
Or no, not about selling wine, but just about commercialism and marketing and capitalism and that sort of thing, or?
To the extent that it would be an irony for his behavior. And really, when he decided to have Pascal and get married, and the first thing he did was move back, because he knew he needed to provide for his family, and he didn't feel like he could do that sufficiently over there. And granted, there were other reasons, visas and language and whatnot, but still, it was definitely a better opportunity for him to come back.
So in the post-college time, so when did you meet David, and how did that whole come about?
I met him when I was interviewing for my job. So he was already working at the firm that I went to work for.
So do you remember that interview process?
I do. It was actually really interesting. I went into an interview with a woman on campus. That was kind of what you did, and there were a number of different rooms, and I really, really liked her and thought this might be a really good fit of a place to go to work for. And apparently after that, I hadn't met him yet. She got up and went into his room and said, "I just met your future wife." And he had not met me. And then I did meet him maybe a month later. He came up to me at a party, and a recruiting party. And he's like, "Oh, you look just like this Theta I used to know." And I thought, oh, nice line. I am a Theta, and I knew he knew I was a Theta, but we became really good friends after that. So I kept in touch with him over the course of my senior year and that summer, and then went to work there. And we started dating that following February, and got engaged in April, and got married in September.
And how many years?
Or October, 22 years.
22. So, and then kind of at that same time, so you, again, had that that path and you kind of figured it out, and right away, it seems like Jimmy's kind of looking around for that relationship. Were there kind of series of relationships, or was he, as he was traveling and that sort of thing, did he write back or tell you about people that he'd met? Or?
Yeah, he had met a bunch of different people. And I don't know. Yeah, so in August of this year, I actually got a phone call from France, the winery did. And it was this woman who was looking for Jimmy. And I called her back, and I didn't understand French and she didn't understand English, and so we texted each other, and I had somebody write her translate for me an email asking her. I could tell she didn't know that he was gone on her message, and so I just asked her some basic questions. Why was she looking for him? Who was she? I mean, I had no idea. And then she wrote back that she had met him in Algeria, and had stayed with his family, and that she had since figured out that he had passed away. She must have looked at the website, or she found some way to find out, but she was too young at the time to come back to the United States with him, but she wanted him to know now that she was a mature woman and how great she had become, and that she was looking for him to show him that. And I just thought, are you kidding me? After how many years, and Algeria, and I mean, it was pretty amazing that he had that kind of an influence on a person who, I don't know, it must have been like 92, so 20 years later is looking for him.
Were you surprised when you heard from her and the story started to unravel?
Super surprised. I mean, I knew about his time in Algeria. I didn't know about her, but I knew he was really good friends with her brother. But I was shocked.
So, do you sometimes wonder who else that he met along his travels that
might call me at some point? Yeah. I mean, my first thoughts were, oh my God, is there a child somewhere else? Is Pascal not his only child? And to date, that's true. Pascal is his only child that I know of. But yeah, I mean, I think with the way that he touched people, I'm sure there's plenty of people that he met throughout his time in Europe, and not just women, but people who would still be very endeared to him.
Do you, as that time was going on, and kind of you heard some of the stories of his kind of changing and moving around and that sort of thing, was that sort of frustrating or just different, or did you just kind of figure that's how he is, and you were, that's kind of my brother? He is, just out exploring the world. I used to worry about him because back then, you weren't texting and emailing and doing a lot of those things, and so the communication wasn't that often, and sometimes we couldn't reach him, like when he went to Algeria and Morocco and a lot of places that were outside of Europe. But it never surprised me, and then when he wanted to move to Poland, it was why Poland? Well, I met a beautiful woman in the Black Cape that was Polish. Not anybody he knew, not anybody he went to find, but he just wanted to follow that, romantic thought to Poland. It was Bogina, right?
Uh-huh.
Did he tell you kind of the story of how they met? And
she was working at a coffee shop and waited on him. So.
And let's see, he was probably in his 20s, mid-20s, or late-20s?
They got married in 95. You're going to test my math. Probably, late 20s. Late 20s.
And so what did you kind of think of that relationship? So he met a woman in Poland in a coffee shop, and...
I thought it was great. She was young. She was 21, I think, at the time. Definitely young, but she seemed like a great girl, and he was super duper happy. So kind of felt like he finally had found the one. And he really didn't have very many long-term relationships when he was in Europe. This was kind of the first time he settled down, and they lived together. And
so, and you're at that time kind of working for you moved into the healthcare industry at some point, or?
Yeah, I stayed in public accounting for a couple years, but within public accounting, moved into their healthcare consulting division. So what was I doing when they were over there? I was working for a startup company, kind of right around that time in 95 and 96.
And I remember from the last time we talked that you liked that some kind of aspect of building something from scratch and that sort of thing. Did you think that would be something that you could just continue doing? Did you enjoy that enough, or did you feel like, oh, there might be something else that I wish I...
No, I did. I definitely did. But as things got developed, I got more just purely into management because we got so much larger. But I think I would have stayed there for quite a while had we not moved to California, but we ended up with Dave's job moving to California.
So, and then at that point, so let's see, how old is Emily now?
She's 14 now, so she was born in 98.
Okay. Did you leave kind of the company when you relocated to where you are now?
California,
Pebble Beach?
Yeah, when we moved from Arizona.
So kind of gave up a career at that point. So was that a hard decision to make, or something that...
You know, it with moving, actually no, because I really was excited to go live in Pebble Beach, California. I mean, I'm pretty, you know, I was good with what we had to give up, and that included my job, and the time was okay because Emily was like a year and a half old. And then when we got there, not really knowing what I was going to do, but probably stay home, is when my dad got real sick. So Emily and I spent 8 months up here with my family, and it was nice to have that flexibility and to not be working. And then we just decided to stay home, for me to stay home. And
no sort of kind of in the back of your mind were you thinking, well, I'll get back into some industry or some business, or back into consulting? Or...
No, I didn't think I would. But I, pursued cooking and tennis and kept myself, busy once again. And, I was new to the area, so meeting friends and making friends and spending time with new people was a big part of what we were doing too.
So, so that's actually a trait that you and Jimmy seem to have in common, is sort of just a large circle of friends and very kind of social. It seems central to both of you that you're part of that. Are there any other things that you share, or any
cooking?
similarities?
We both love to cook. What else would we do together? Talked about cooking a lot. And talked about business a lot, both with what either one of us were doing. I mean, obviously more so when he got here. We both loved to travel. When I could, before I had kids, when Dave had the opportunity to be in Europe, I'd go meet up with Jimmy and travel. It was really fun when we traveled at his wedding, just to have him be our guide and to take us to Budapest and some different places that, probably never would have gone to. They wouldn't have been high on my list, but I'm glad that I was able to go to Warsaw and Krakow and Budapest, and they're amazing countries.
Did you, when they decided to come back here, what kind of was that transition like? Did you kind of get a sense that he was ready to come home? And
no, I don't think he was ready to come home, but I don't think he felt like he had a choice with having a baby. And it was tough. It was tough for both of them. She was, 21, a newborn, didn't know how to drive, barely knew the language. She worked nights at first. She worked the graveyard shift at UPS, loading trucks for a number of years, and would go to work after Jimmy would come home. And that was hard, I think, on their relationship. And then they lived with my parents, and my dad was getting more and more ill. And so that added, a lot of stress to their situation too.
When did you kind of get a sense that he wanted to do something serious with wine?
Well, and that's what he did straight away when he got home. Was his first job was a vineyard manager at Willackenzie. And I remember visiting him there, and he had just started Brooks that year, and was talking to him about how what classes did you take? What books do you use? And it was none of that, and which was really hard for me to understand. How there weren't recipes or formulas or because I would have needed that. And he was the same way with cooking or anything he did. There weren't a lot of guidelines and rules and structure. And
so, do you think he had sort of a gift or a natural aptitude for kind of the winemaking process?
Yeah, and he'd been part of the beer making process at one point when he was at McMinimum's. And I think that his cooking, I really think just gave him that desire, and he knew he could create and experiment and, wouldn't do it from a recipe. I'm a good cook, but I use recipes and I don't really waver from them.
So, he went on towards launching his label and starting with the business, when did you kind of realize that he was doing something unique or different from what other people were doing? Or did you get a sense of that at all?
Not until he passed away. I had no idea. I knew he was making wine and seemed like it was going well, but I had no idea really about anything in the wine industry, so I had no idea.
But you talked about the business side of things, it sounds like, and had some, conversations about maybe he was looking for advice or things of that nature. So.
Well, and that was all kind of financial related, of how was he going to get out from having to make his wine in somebody else's building, and that he could have his own place, not work for somebody anymore, which was, really what he wanted to stop doing and be his own boss and just have a lot more flexibility with his brand.
And were you kind of curious at that point to, wondering about how he would compete, or did you give any advice or any counsel on?
It wasn't so much about how he would compete. For me, it was about security. That what does he have that's going to allow him, I guess, to survive if he doesn't have the security of working for someone else? It seemed to me like his situation was very comfortable. He has a building provided for him, equipment provided for him, shelter, basically, and that he wanted to give that up and bear a lot of those costs on his own.
So on your side, you might be a good kind of fit for working in a large company and kind of more comfortable with that type of situation, whereas he wanted maybe more control or to be able to do his own thing or that sort of thing. So that sort of seems like it's a difference in terms of he would never work for a large corporation or
never
be comfortable with
never. And I think that's the same contrast that we've always had. That was always the first thing that would come to my mind. Same reason with why don't you go get a degree that can get you a job? Why are you just getting a degree? Like, it just didn't make sense to me.
And yet now you're kind of an entrepreneur and have a business where you're kind of on the other side of things. So have you changed at all kind of as a result of the whole process of going through, being confronted with having to take care of this small business? And
yeah, and it's all been driven by wanting to continue it and to grow it and to have it succeed, and I've totally thrown away my security with the way that I've gone about it. I'm getting to the point now where we're secure, but in all the years of growth and not knowing what I was doing, I can look back and that was so not my typical path.
So that's not something you would have ever done on your own?
No, and I'm so grateful and glad that I did it. The rewards that I've gotten from being able to continue it have far outweighed any of the risks that I ever saw. And a lot of that perspective, I'm sure, just comes from death and really what's going to happen at the end of the day. Unfortunately, I use the term all the time, nobody's going to die if it doesn't get done. Nobody's going to die if it doesn't happen. And so you put a bunch of money into something and you work hard and you hope it works. And I never would have done that before without the certainty of knowing that it was going to work. I mean, I definitely have gotten a lot of good support and direction or agreement with my decisions from a lot of people in the industry who have kind of been there, done that, but I didn't know how to do it necessarily.
Is that something that you would be comfortable tackling again, or would you need sort of another big motivation, like carrying on thing, or some impetus to do it again?
No, I love it. I mean, like I said, it's hard to, how can I define the rewards? I mean, it's just having that passion. I feel like he tried to, part of him leaving and leaving me with this and it happening the way that it did was so that I would break out of my recipe a little bit and take something on and live every day about being excited and being passionate about something. And I feel like it was a gift in a lot of ways. And I'm sure he's going to give me more as time goes on. And so will life, but it's a different way to look at it.
So maybe another niece or nephew surprise gift.
Yeah.
One of those. What about the he was living with your parents while he was getting into the wine industry and that sort of thing, but it was kind of news to you that he was so well respected and well regarded. Do you think they ever kind of knew that side of him or that sort of his stature?
My dad probably did, but I doubt my mom really understood it. But I would say again, not nearly as high as it was. I think it was probably as foreign to them as it was to me, and it wasn't in the social circles that influenced them and that they were a part of. So I doubt they knew the path that he was taking and how successful he would end up being.
Do you think you could have been business partners?
Well, we were talking about it. I mean, we were, from a financial standpoint, I know he was looking for us to invest. And I don't know whether or not we would have, but that was definitely part of the discussions. And then he had come down a couple times and we had gone out to try to sell his wine. So we were toying with the idea of me representing the brand in California.
And now, as you're going out, you've got sort of this story or sort of in a style of wine that you're trying to introduce other people to. How do you think he would kind of view people's response to his style or his type of wine now? And is that something that you still kind of carry in the types of wine that you make?
Definitely, we continue to carry his philosophy and his style, which primarily are more, high acid, low alcohol wines. Selling dry Riesling wasn't easy for him, and I wouldn't walk around and say that it's easy for me. And I think sticking with that is a great testament to what he wanted to try to accomplish. All the people love the label and the graphics, and he created that. That was all his deal. The business model and the price points and keeping things affordable, that was all his creation too, and people really appreciate that.
So, do you think there are things that you look at that you would do differently that might be more economically sound choices or directions, but it wouldn't be kind of true to the spirit of things, or that so you go in a different direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of our wines are very value driven from a price standpoint. And there's an opportunity to raise prices, but as soon as you do that, you start taking away the opportunity for more people to enjoy it. And that was something that he was very vocal about, was he wanted them accessible and he wanted people drinking them. And so there's kind of a boundary or a threshold that you don't go over price-wise, or you won't be poured by the glass. You won't be, multiple case sales at a time. And so we've built a lot of our growth around trying to maintain those principles, but then maybe adding other labels that do sit on a list or a smaller production but are higher priced to try to help support the wines that are less expensive.
Do you think that there's sort of a disadvantage sometimes? I mean, I'll hear stories sometimes of somebody, doubling the price of their wine, and all of a sudden they're getting more recognition and better scores and taken more seriously just by setting the price point. Do you think you lose anything in that
No,
respect?
because I don't think that they should be taken. I mean, I just don't agree with that. In terms of that being, and that does happen. And it definitely, there's a lot of the publications that will help drive an effect like that. And I'm not saying I wouldn't take it, but we didn't raise our prices during the sideways craze for Pinot Noir, and everybody did. And as a result, we have a ton of loyalty for the markets that we were in at that time from those buyers who know that we didn't take the price up when we could. And they appreciate that. So I'd rather be kind of the strong and steady, long-term, because I did get a lot of people who said we should raise our prices and that still say that. And sometimes it's in a way to be opportunistic and not necessarily a long-term strategy. And I'd much rather, I guess that's the planner coming back at me a little bit, would rather have the long-term success.
What do you think that kind of Jimmy's, you're coming up on the 15th anniversary now, and what do you think he would think about sort of the size and the scale and everything that you've done with it since taking over the management side?
I don't think that he would have grown it as much as I have. I want to say he was at 2,200 cases. I just looked at the numbers again for our 15 years, just looking at the growth. And it also takes capital. So depending on whether or not he could get capital and who it came from and what that relationship would be, I think he could if that would have all gone his way. But I don't know how aggressively he would have pursued that.
Do you think he would have been able to kind of be self-supporting with his own label, and he was going down that road, but do you think it would have been a long-term possibility to? Or
he would have changed labels or come up with a new winery, or I'm not sure. I think part of Brooks would have always stayed, but with everybody that's in the spirits business that he's friends with, that might have been something he would have pursued. I'm sure he would have held on to some of it for tradition's sake, but I think he would have probably been more bold with changes and just different ways to pursue it in the industry.
Well, that's what he said. Oh, we probably would be making brandy together.
Yeah.
And I know Tad is wine and spirit, so it seems like that they would have. When I asked them, they said, "Oh, we probably would have been doing this together."
Yeah.
Or, experimenting and different
like
things.
Sam and he were doing some experimental wines. So I think, his style of Pinot Noir, especially back then, was pretty bold. And making dry Riesling is a pretty bold move too. So I think he would have continued on that path. I just don't know that size-wise production he would have ever gotten to or wanted to get to 10,000 cases.
So I wanted to connect the dots a little bit on the story. Yours is pretty linear with 22 years of marriage, but you mentioned that Ogina and Jimmy, kind of the challenges that they faced because they had eventually separated at some point. What were some of the factors and that led to that, and the challenges that they faced as a young couple? And
I think socially it was hard for them. I think he was very integrated quickly into the wine community because of who he was and what his personality was. She had a baby, she was at home, she didn't speak the language well. And as she got more and more secure or knew she was going to be here, and one thing she wanted to do was pursue her education. And that just kind of ended up at about the same time they decided to split up, and she moved to Portland to go get her bachelor's degree, and she did. and he didn't want to leave this area because he was, trying to build his winery. And my parents being sick, there were just a lot of factors, I think, substantial to a new life and a new baby and new jobs and a new country and new languages, that it was just hard for them to come together on a lot of that stuff.
And then he had kind of found somebody that had been described as, sort of found the person that he was looking for.
Yeah.
But how did that relationship come about? And
I'm trying to think if they actually, I can't remember if they met because he came to see her as a patient. She's an acupuncturist. Or if maybe they met at a party before that and then she invited him in or something. But it was short, but it was definitely the one. I felt like he had finally found her. Like I could see more of a balance of experience in Europe, but back in the United States, in capitalism, in the person that he ended up with, just a little bit more full circle, I think. And she's a lovely person. She's a lovely Dawn's great.
And so now Ogina's doing, I think we talked about it last time, doing research in working in Pennsylvania.
She's in Pennsylvania, but she got her nursing degree. So she's actually an ICU nurse now.
And you feel like she's kind of settled and adjusted and...
Yeah, I think she'll always miss Jimmy a lot. I'm not sure that it was totally her idea for them to split apart. I think that was a little bit more his doing than hers. I know she still loves him very much. And I think in both their spirits, they cared so much about taking care of Pascal. And I think she's really happy that she has that as part of him still. But yeah, I think they're very settled in Pennsylvania. And she loves what she's doing. She works hard. She's an amazing girl to come over here in the situation she did and get 2 degrees and financially supports herself and is still a good mom.
And Pascal, it's probably some of the challenges, just everything that he's gone through. He seems like a pretty strong kid. I know we talked about this a little bit, but what do you see that comes from your brother, and what do you see that's maybe part of him that comes from his mother, and some differences?
His writing and his passion for writing. I just finished, he writes for our annual newsletter for the winery, and it's just Jimmy. It's so like the descriptors, and it's unbelievable how well he writes, and he has for a really long time. His love of knowledge. The kid reads books all the time. He always has 2 or 3 or 4 books he's reading at a time. And I think that all comes from Jimmy. He's very focused right now on school and wanting to get good enough grades so that he can go to the college he wants to go to, and that probably comes a little bit more from his mom. He's, and he's funny, like Jimmy, more so than his mom. But he's sweet too. He's got a really big heart about him, and I think that comes obviously from both of them.
Is there anything, you spent a lot of time with him, mm-hmm. and over the years, so is there anything that he might get from you or have learned?
Threats. The planner in me. Well, I think probably just what I've thrown myself into to do on behalf of him and his dad, and I know he's really grateful for that, and the ties that he still has into this community that had I not done this he wouldn't have, but that's part of why we're doing it too. I don't know.
Now, and part of the community seems to be this big kind of movable feast that's still going on to a certain extent, but that's something that Jimmy started, and obviously yourself with the cooking, you had similar interests in gathering people together around food and wine, but that was really important to him. But were you part of any of those sort of celebrations that happened with the wine community at all, or witnessed to it, or heard stories of it, or?
Heard lots of stories. No, and I missed a big one that he wanted me to be a part of the summer before he passed away. And I was supposed to be a part of it, but I went home.
I think we talked a little bit about that
Yeah.
last time, but
Yeah.
maybe let's talk about that experience again. So what were some kind of the circumstances around that?
Well, so my parents both passed away in 2000, and I had just a really hard time coming back to Oregon. So Jimmy and I would get together with the kids in different places, in California and Disneyland, and took some different trips together. And he was going to be part of this event called the National Pinot Noir Celebration, or IPNC, in July of 2004 for the first time, and wanted me to come up. And I decided, okay, I'll go back to Oregon, and I'm going to go for 3 weeks. So I came up and got here and started visiting with different people, and every person, drug my kids around to go see my parents' friends and some of my friends and see him. And I felt like I was constantly, who am I going to go see today type of thing. And it was kind of stressful for me. And then a lot of the end of those visits, it was, oh, you're here for 3 weeks. When will we get to see you again? And I just got to the point where I couldn't deal with it anymore. And I just wanted to go home. I think I just got overwhelmed with seeing that many people that were that close to my family, and feeling like, there was no value in it for my kids really, because they were too young. And so I decided to go home a week early, and I went home the week before IPNC, and he was not happy with me at all. I mean, it really hurt his feelings, and I had absolutely no clue why it was such a big deal, what it even meant. I had never been to a wine festival in my life. I mean, I had no idea how important it was to him until he got mad at me, and then after the fact. But now I know.
Did you, when you were going to that event, realize, or was there a point, did you attend it afterwards for kind of a first time? And
yeah,
was there...
we've attended, we've participated. I mean, part of it for me is I want to, because I messed up that year by not, and it was important to him, so I want to keep the Brooks, brand part of the event itself. But he had a huge paella party with fire dancers and all sorts of stuff at his house one of the nights during that celebration. And I still meet people, or people come up to me and say, oh, it was like your brother's paella party. It must have been a huge party. But it was a pretty phenomenal night for him, and apparently for everybody that was there. I haven't repeated the paella party yet.
Do you remember the first time you went to the IPNC afterwards? What was that experience like?
I don't remember. Probably wasn't in 05. It was probably maybe 06. They rotate, so you don't get to participate every year, and he had participated in 2004. But it's an opportunity where hundreds of savvy wine consumers come from all over the country and get to try your wine. So I understood pretty quick what a cool event it was, and that you're not in it every year. And it still is. It's a great event. But it's a big event. I mean, it is like the best Pinot Noir celebration anywhere. So.
When you do attend, is there anything, you said you hadn't repeated the party or anything like that, is there anything special you do
not so much special, but no, because in some ways you're not really supposed to host other events, because it is a structured program, but...
So he was breaking the rules a little bit.
Probably. But I meet people every year that knew him. from all over the country and tell me stories about, the year that he did participate. Because a lot of those people have come back year after year after year, but it's one of those events that's so big that you see the same people all the time, and then you don't see so many people. So over the years, I've met so many different people who knew him.
Were there any other surprises in terms of people that had met him or that knew him that you were kind of surprised or stand out?
I think hearing about how impressed they were by him and his wines for some of these people that have been coming all 25 years to IPNC is pretty phenomenal. But otherwise, I don't know if there's any individuals that surprised me.
And that was something that you kind of learned after the fact of how, special his wines are. Is there anything else that you've learned about just the winemaking or winemaking process that you've has been his influence, I guess, on other people in the area, or that he's changed, or anything that he's left that kind of might have shifted a little bit because he became involved in it when he did and the way he did?
Yeah, the farming, so the biodynamic farming for sure. I mean, he was definitely a leader in that, and there's more and more people that are farming under those practices throughout the Willamette Valley. And Riesling. I mean, those are the two things he came into the industry talking about. There's more and more Riesling producers, even though it's still very tiny for a lot of people, but we really get looked at as kind of one of the longest standing Riesling producers. And because it's our focus, we get a lot of people who come over here and talk to Chris about making Riesling and buy our Riesling from us too, our grapes.
And what might have been lost if you didn't kind of step in and take over? Is there any impact on the industry or the community, or?
I think the farming part of it might have wavered a little bit. I mean, both those things, because there's only 3 of us that make Riesling as our primary white in Oregon, and we're 5 to 10 times the size as the other producers. But I think one of the things that continues to strike me about the fact that we've kept the brand going is just how relevant it's kept Jimi and how top of mind he is for people. Whereas if maybe they hadn't seen the brand for the last 8 years, they wouldn't remember his influence. Because I still hear more and more stories about the influence that he had on people, and I just don't think, I think some of those stories would go away. And I think people appreciate that somebody had that kind of influence and presence, and that they remember him that much better because the brand still continues and they're reminded of him on a much more regular basis.
So you're kind of keeping him around to a certain extent through the brand and through the winery?
Yeah. And I can't, it's also, we were up at Youngberg Hill this Labor Day weekend for a wedding, and I had never been there. I know the owners, and I knew they knew Jimi, and but we were kind of going to this wedding where the day before we were at a wedding that was very Jimi focused, and kind of why we're even in this industry and why we'd be invited to this wedding had, complete to do with the fact that we've continued the brand. So Dave and I go to this wedding, we kind of felt like we were going to be a little bit off the radar, because we really didn't know anybody but the groom and Chris, our winemaker. But the owner came up to me and she said, why we're here? And, we're standing on this gorgeous property with amazing views of the McMinnville foothill. She goes, because of Jimi. He convinced us to buy this land, pack up our stuff, move out from Chicago, plant grapes, and build a winery. And she said he used to come over all the time and walk through the vineyard with her husband and really helped shepherd their dream in a lot of ways. But I had David and I looked at each other and we're like, really? Like everywhere we go, people have a story about how he had a substantial influence in their life.
and that's still shaping kind of what you're doing too. So
And it drives me to keep wanting to do it and to do it better and to make it as successful as I possibly can.
now, if let's say you got to this point and there was no connection to Jimmy or something, do you still think you'd be as passionate about building a business in the wine industry, just knowing what you've learned since that time?
Well, in terms of the people that I've connected with since I started in this, they keep me motivated too. I mean, I love it. It's a great industry. The wine industry is amazing, full of, just super passionate people. So I would hope so.
And what about you live in California, so why not get involved with the wine industry there in your backyard?
Because this is a full-time job for me up here. And there's still plenty to do.
You never talked about moving anything closer to home or
No.
anything like that, so.
No.
Are you pretty much here to stay for the long term?
With Brooks, doing this for the rest of my life. I hope so. I don't know that I'll stay as active forever, but I will always want, it's very personal to me how it goes and how successful it is. And, we've stopped growing production now, and I'm hoping that that's where we stay. And that will make things a little bit easier.
You never see yourself getting tired of it or wanting to try something else or some different industry or start something new in another area?
No. And I can't imagine that there's an industry out there that's full of better people. They're all my dear, dear, dear friends. Maybe selling and marketing somebody else's brand or distillery or whatever it might be, if they're a dear friend, and I would do it for the purpose of helping and not necessarily for employment, and to learn, different things possibly. But at this point, there's no time.
Now, what advice might you have? You mentioned the couple from Chicago who Jimmy had talked them into, or motivated them to kind of follow their goals. What advice would you have to somebody who you might meet on your travels and look at brochure or something like that and say, oh, what does it take to make a winery? I'd like to do that someday. Would you have any advice or?
It's I think the hardest part is selling it. And it just takes a lot of time. I think sometimes people think that if they make a good product, that it sells itself. And I think this industry is far too competitive for that. And it's all based on relationships, and relationships take time. And I even see when we go into a new market, it takes 3 or 4 or 5 years, of brand awareness to pick up to where it kind of sustains itself. And that's a lot of time and a lot of travel and a lot of effort, and it's the most important part for sure. So you've got to be willing to do that piece of it.
So wine is blank. So whatever comes to mind.
Passion comes to mind first. I'm probably not the only one that said that. It's a story, too. The people who drink it, as well as the brand itself, is, the whole way that it works and what it's used for and how it's consumed, and there's always a story with it.
Great.